Richard Pearson is a triple threat author, actor, and attorney. He grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas, where he appeared in many plays and musicals. After graduating from Rhodes College, Richard went on to obtain a law degree from Rutgers School of Law. And while he works as an attorney by day, his nights and weekends are spent writing novels and performing in theatrical events all over New York City. Richard lives in Jersey City with his brilliant husband, Brian, and their amazing daughter, Natalie. And his debut novel, The Role, was just recently released. Richard, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. We're glad you reached out. You'd been listening to the show, and then you reached out, and I think it was via Twitter, and was like, you need to read this book because you like theater. And sure enough.
I know, I was very excited. I was like, oh my gosh, like not only do they talk about fiction, but like they're really into theater. They will love it.
And I did love it. It was a great read. So tell people about The Role.
The Role is basically a novel that is about a actor who is struggling in the business, and he's thinking about quitting, and right as that moment happens, he is granted this amazing opportunity where he gets the big Broadway break that every actor dreams of. And what he learns is getting that break is not really the hard part. The hard part is like making it through opening night, and his obtaining of the role comes with a lot of strings, and it makes him wonder whether or not it's really worth it.
So what was the inspiration for the book? I imagine a lot of it was what you actually go through when you're performing at these events, these theatrical events.
Definitely. A lot of it had to do with that. I mean, when I was in my early 20s, I had like this whole thing. Like I grew up, in the South, and I just wanted to get to New York City since like I knew what it was. And I thought, I'm going to go to New York City, and it's going to be fabulous, and it's going to be amazing, and everyone's going to love me. And I did not do that. I ended up going home to my hometown, and I got like a job doing something legal, like as a paralegal, and it just kind of stuck. But I always still continued to perform, and I was fortunate enough to finally come to New York City. And I remember going on my very first audition, and I had no idea how it all worked in like the real professional theater world. And I wrote all of these like journal entries about it, and as I kind of slowly stopped getting as much work as I used to, I just kind of kept like this journal about it. And I became an attorney, and then I had a really hard time getting a job out of law school. And so, like, to keep my sanity, I was like, I'll just write a book. I've always wanted to read this book about an actor on Broadway who's gay, and like, where is that story? And so I was like, I waited for years for it to happen, and like, I just realized no one was going to write it, so it was my job to do so. And so, yeah, a lot of it is pulled from like personal like experience, particularly at the beginning. Like, that is exactly what it is like to go through an audition. I mean, there's a lot of other funny quirks to it. Like, you'll have generally two things happen. You will go to an audition, and you will be in a room full of 20 to 40 people who look exactly like you, which is really funny. Or you have the opposite happen, which is you go into a room where 39 other people look nothing like you, and then you wonder why you're there.
So there's a lot of subplots in the novel. There's the primary of Mason getting his, going for his dream finally, but there's all this other stuff going on. How did you decide what to put in and maybe what to leave out? I envisioned in my head like there's like all these DVD extras sitting off on the side. Maybe they didn't make it into the book.
You were absolutely right. There are. I wrote a really rough outline, and in it, like, I went in through like all of the stuff, like the producer character who was like barely in it, like had like this whole other subplot about how hard it was to fund this kind of a show and that kind of a thing. So like that just got cut completely. And when I was doing my first draft, like I wrote like little bits of those kinds of things, and then I would realize that like it was just not really helping the narrative progress at all. So then I would have to like truncate them or like cut them entirely. And then when I got done with my first draft, like one of the editors who looked at it was like, well, like your book is really interesting, but like not enough happens in it. And so I was like, oh, I guess that means I can bring out some more of those subplots that I had done. like initially there is a character in my novel that is an understudy, and in the first draft of it, that character is never named, and he's like this shadowy figure that like you only kind of vaguely understand as someone waiting in the wings. And then people were like, well, I didn't really get this aspect of it. I was like, great, that means I can tell that whole extra part of the story. So yeah, like every single one of my characters probably has like this whole other side story that goes on, and choosing them was really, really hard. And I kind of looked at the major themes of it and like what I was trying to get across. Like, you learn a lot about the actress in the show and like what her personal life is like, because she has a very different non-heteronormative arrangement with her life partner. And since like playing with that is a theme in the book, that like sometimes people have different arrangements in what their relationships are like. So I was like, I wanted to present that story so that all of the characters who are in the novel could see that that was an option, and like how to do it appropriately as opposed to perhaps not.
Hmm. Yeah, and both of those actually were two of my favorite bits of the book. The understudy in particular had a nice character arc without giving any spoilers, along the way. Um, that story played out really nicely.
Thank you, thank you. He was one of those fun characters that, like, when I decided to like actually let him play his full role in like the whole text, he just kind of popped into my head fully formed, and I really enjoyed getting to write that, because I was like, well, like I thought that it was weird that I wrote a novel about theater that didn't really have like the bitchy theater person in it. And so I was like, that's not really doing the many, many, many people who I've met backstage and on stage who are like that a lot of justice. Like, there's nothing more boring than watching a show that goes particularly well all the time and like that doesn't have that kind of drama. And so I was really excited to get to throw him into the mix. And when I did, it changed so many dynamics, and I really, really like loved it. He's definitely like my favorite character that I got to add, and I'm super glad that someone was like, you should add more like elements to make the like overall like will he succeed, will he not succeed arc more interesting. And I loved getting to add him. He was super fun.
Hmm. And you were right about that. I can't think of another book that I've read that makes me feel like, that I was really inside the process for a show of this kind. The only other book that I could think of, Tim Federle did 5, 6, 7, 8, and the sequel to that. But that was a different perspective coming from the 13, 14-year-old's perspective.
No, I love those books. They're so wonderful, and it was definitely one of those things. Like, I remember when I was reading it, because I was, in my no, I was in my early 30s by the time I read them, and I was like, oh, where was this book when I was 13? Because I love them, and I was like, oh, this is exactly like the kind of kid that I was and that I wanted to be, and it was everything that I was hoping, and it made me so happy that that book existed. And like, I've told him on many occasions, like on Twitter, we're not like super best friends or anything. I was just like, thank you for your book, and like he like posted this thing about how he went to an event, and like one of the librarians was like, well, we don't carry your book because we think it's like evil. And I was like, this book would have like saved me so much heartache in middle school and high school. Not that anyone gets out of those two things unscathed, but like it would have been nice to feel, a little bit like I'm less of a loner, and like that book totally like it's one of those things that you just kind of clutched your heart and love. But yeah, there are not a lot of books that focus on the behind the scenes and like what it's like to rehearse a show. And when I'm in a show, it's like my favorite thing to do. Whenever I go to rehearsal and I come home, like I have to tell someone, whether in college it was all of my roommates, now it's my husband. I have to like come down and like be like, let me tell you all of this crazy backstage stuff. So, and like, it's great for me, but then it ruins the show, whatever it is that I'm in, for whoever I have to talk to, because by the time they see it, they know all of this weird backstage stuff, but they have no idea what the plot of the play is. So they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I'm like, I know you don't understand, but like when you see it, it will all make sense. And they're like, okay, sure, whatever.
What did your theater friend you?
I wrote a lot as a kid. Just like I was really, really into like high fantasy. Like my favorite book as a kid was like The Last Unicorn and The Book of Three, and so I used to write these like big, very poorly written because I was like a sixth grader fantasy epics. And then when I was mainly a musician as a child. Like I had a really like pretty high voice, so I just kind of sang a lot of music and I didn't really act so much. And then when my voice changed, I had to like figure out what I was gonna do. So I like started doing plays and musicals again. And when I did that, writing kind of fell away because I was so focused on doing theater and that kind of a thing. And in college, I did take the two only fiction courses that were provided, and at that time, like, I was still like I was very out because I'm just a very obvious homosexual, but I wrote nothing but like weird, like finding your voice gay fiction, and I was super worried about it because Rhodes College didn't have a lot of gay people at it, and so I was like, I don't want to be like the gay author of Rhodes College, and then all of the people in my fiction group were very lovely, and they were like, no, actually, we really like that we get to hear this voice because it's not something we get to hear that often. And so I wrote a lot during college and afterwards, and then I met my husband, and I was like, and still am exceptionally blissfully happy. And there's nothing worse for a writer than being super content and happy. Because when I met him, I was writing, I would call it fiction, but I guess that's what you would call it. It was just like a series of dates that went well with fictional characters. And like, there's nothing more boring than that. And so then I was like, this is so boring. Like, am I like, have I just like lost my authorial voice or what happened? And so then finally I kind of figured out, I was like, I just have to pretend in my universe that I don't have like a loving, wonderful, super supportive husband, and therefore like figure out what I would do and what I would be writing if I didn't have that. So I have to like go to like a weird space where like I pretend my husband doesn't exist in order to like find conflict again. And so after I learned how to do that, that was when I decided like I had started like 10 novels and I'd get 10,000 words in and then I'd quit because I would run out of steam somehow. And I was like, you know, I just really need to batten down and finish one. And if I was going to finish one novel, I wanted it to be this theater story that I've been waiting to read my entire life. And so that's what I did. And much like my first play, like it really just like when you get the bug after that, there's no going back. And so ever since then, I've really enjoyed writing, and I'm really excited about writing new things and exploring other, you know, aspects of like cultures that I find interesting.
What kind of process do you follow? Are you a plotter or a pantser? Sounds like you're a plotter based on the outline you talked about for the role.
I mean, it was like, well, the problem was I wrote this outline and then about 20% of it made it. I have that thing where like I had these characters in mind, and after I had a really strong, like after first 50 pages, I really know my main characters really, really well. Like I've got their voice, I've got their motivations, I've got all of that stuff. And then they just took me to places I did not know I was going to go. And then I felt like they were leading me on the right track. And so I often abandon outlines, but I'm always happy to have them just because I'm like, well, if I get really lost, then like that's good. But most of the time, I don't make, and I like generally have an idea of a beginning and an end, and the middle of it is always up for grabs. And however, my newest project, like I wrote an outline in like, you know, an hour. It all just kind of like hit me all at once, and I was like, well, great. If I get lost, at least I know what I'm doing. But I don't ever kind of like keep it up when I'm writing. I like have written it down, therefore it's kind of internalized, and then I just let my characters kind of take me where they want to go, and if they don't know where they want to go, I know exactly where I want them to go. But other than that, yeah. So I have like a rough plot outline, but I'm always very jealous of people who like can write out an outline and then just follow it. I'm always like, oh, I wish I could do that. I would get so much more writing done if I could just do that. But then like some random thought will like flood into my brain, and I'll think, oh, this must be what my character is telling me, and then we'll go to like this random place that I didn't know that I was going to go to, and then I was like, oh, that actually really works really well. Oh, okay, so now how do I fix this? Okay, all right, there, yes, let's go, and then I'll get back on track.
So that answer makes me have to ask a question about Kevin. How much did he deviate potentially from your outline? Because no other character in the book seems to boomerang around so much in terms of behavior through the novel.
Actually, Kevin was pretty close to the outline.
Wow. Okay.
Because people who are exceptionally good at what they do, and in the theater world and in the acting world, good actors are often exceptionally good looking. And when you are exceptionally good looking, you live a life that many people do not know. In 30 Rock, like, John Hamm lives in the bubble, and like he has all of these funny jokes where, like, you know, he doesn't know how to play tennis, but because he looks good doing it, like, people are like, "Can you give lessons?" kind of a thing. And that is kind of what Kevin's life is like. Like, Kevin and I've met people like that, and I've shared a stage with those people, and they are both absolutely inspiring and wonderful to be around. But then you see what they are like off stage, and you just like, you're like, what? Like, you are so hard to like pin down. And so, no, Kevin definitely, like, he is, you're right, he boomerangs everywhere, and his behavior is slightly erratic. And it's because he kind of can get away with that because he's never had anyone to tell him no, and he's been fortunate enough to be pretty enough and talented enough that it's always worked out for him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. So who are your author inspirations?
Oh, well, my very first, like, when I recently, like, the first time I came out, someone handed me David Levitt's The Lost Language of Cranes, and that book made me think, like, I can tell the kind of story that I always wanted to tell. So I always like credit him as like an early inspiration, and there are a lot of them, but really the ones that really made a big impact were David Levitt, Edmund White, David Levithan, and oh gosh, what is the woman who wrote The Hunger Games? I always think her name is
Suzanne Collins.
Suzanne Collins, thank you.
Yeah.
I get her and the woman who wrote Jonathan Strange confused in my head for some reason. She really opened my eyes because she wrote such a very like compelling book written in first person present tense, and I loathe describing anything. And so when you write in that voice and that voice style, you can get away with perhaps not describing so many things. And I was like, oh, this is the way that I can tell this story. And so I always credit her for like showing me that it can be done and how to do it well. And, you know, I've read those books, you know, over and over and over again, just to kind of get that style and understand like where and when to place detail and when and where I can get away with not doing it.
So you've got an appearance coming up at the Bureau, who are friends of our podcast. Tell us a little bit about that. I was very
glad when you interviewed him. I was like, oh, they're such lovely people. And,
yes, they are.
You know, it is, you know, when I heard that we didn't have a queer bookstore in New York City, I was like, why did I move to New York City? Like, that's supposed to always be here, like, kind of a thing. And I'm so glad when they brought it back. And it's actually a really lovely space. I've always really enjoyed it. I always encourage people to go. I encourage people to just go to the Gay and Lesbian Center in New York City. It is this amazing resource. And for the first year that I was here, I just didn't really understand what it did or what it was like, and I'm like, I should have just gone, like my first day in the city, because there's so much going on there, and it's such a lovely space and a wonderful thing. And I'm doing a reading and interview with one of your favorite authors, Joe Okonkwo, who wrote Jazz Moon, which I'm so glad that you loved. And I'm still in the middle of it because I'm a slow reader, but I'm loving every minute of it. It
Yeah,
is
it's
such
amazing.
a beautiful, beautiful book.
Yeah, Joe will be on the show in a few weeks too.
Oh, good. I'm glad. He is an absolute delight. When I met him, like we just got along on so many levels because he used to also be an actor. So like we had a lot in common. Also, he also lived in Houston, which I lived in there for a while. So we just had like a lot of really fun, crazy connections.
And that's June 8th, right?
It is June 8th. So if you are in the New York City area, I really, really implore you to come visit because it is going to be one of those amazing nights. I think the conversation and very interesting, like our books do not on like the surface have a lot to do with each other, but when you're reading them and if you kind of look at them as a, tandem text, it's very interesting. And I
Yeah,
think that
there's
will really be a fun night.
there's interesting connections there because when Joe first reached out, I think you put him in touch with us. He
Yeah,
mentioned that you
yeah.
guys were doing that event, and it's like as I thought about it, and I got into reading Jazz Moon, I'm like, I see how there's a connectivity there.
There is, and like I really am so excited, and I think that, you know, as much as I love talking about myself, I'm really excited to like get to talk, to him about like his process and like asking how he handled the same things that I did. And so like I just think that because he did them very differently, and I love it. Like I'm just like, oh, this is the reason why I love writing about art and about theater and things like that because there's so many ways to do the same thing, and yet we all do it very differently. And Joe is a master. Like it was just absolutely lovely.
So what's coming up next for you? What are you working on these days?
Well, I have two books in the works. I have a kitchen-based kind of more traditional romance that I am hoping that I will get to possibly sooner because I had one of those moments where the whole plot of it just kind of threw itself into my brain all at once. So I was like, oh, I thought I was working on this other novel. And my other project is about gamer culture, and that's gamer with a Y. And, because I love video games and always have. And, like, when I found out, like, that there are tons of people who love video games. I'm like, where were my people when I was in the 80s and playing Nintendo? But like now that like, you can play online games, you can do all sorts of stuff. There's all this really, really great, stuff. And like you can go on these adventures with people, on your computer. And it's just such a wonderful, crazy thing. And it, especially gamer culture in general is so masculine dominated, like the whole Gamergate thing, and so like I love that there's this pocket of like very accepting, loving, wonderful people, all of whom, just we always just kind of wanted to go on adventures together, and now we can, and I think that it is such a wonderful thing.
Are you going to let Mason's boyfriend show up in that book since he designs games?
Both Mason and Eric will show up in probably any book that takes place in my like kind of hyper New York universe.
Awesome.
In little ways. Like I'm pretty sure, like whether or not it's like the Tony Awards where like Mason and Eric are like guests or possibly winning or whatever, like will be on in the background, or Eric like will be designing a game and that kind of a thing. I think that it's fun to have those little pockets for readers. That way they can be like, oh, that's that person. And then like if you don't know if my gamer book is the first one you pick up, then it doesn't really matter. But I love doing that. I think that that's a lot of fun, and I hope to like because I love those characters so much that I hope that they and some of the other supporting characters can show up in many things.
Yeah.
I like kind of building a world in which that is a possibility.
Awesome. So where can folks find you online to keep up with everything?
Well, you can go to my website, which is richardtpearson.com. You can follow me on Twitter. I am author RTP, which is kind of odd because there's two R's right next to each other. But all of the good ones were taken. And so those are the two best ways to find me. My website will point you to Facebook or Twitter or anything else like that.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
What did your theater friends think of this book?
So far, all of them have loved it. Particularly my actress friends. They all believe that Julia, the main actress in the book, is based on them. And to a small extent, they are all technically right. That actress character is kind of compiled out of about 1,000 different women that I've met in my life. And so, yeah, no, a lot. And like, I was very excited because two very professional stage managers that I've worked with read it, and both of them loved it. And I was like, thank you, because the stage manager is like the whipping boy character in my book. She just gets nothing. She gets no love. And so I was like, I'm glad that like you weren't mad about that. But no,
I probably know it's true.
It is. It's very true. When I think back on like how I did not understand what a stage manager did for many, many years and like all of the things that they do and like all of like just the weird things that I would ask them. I'd be like, hi, when I get off stage, could you please make sure that like this is here? And like I'm sure she was thinking, I have 700 other things to do right now, but yes, of course, absolutely, whatever you need, kind of a thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. So it was fun because like when you're writing this book and you're having to like kind of get into the mindset of each one of those people and like figure out what they actually do for you on any given day, like I've apologized to many of my prior stage manager and technical crew being like, hi, I'm really sorry. I probably should have been a lot more thankful to you.
So when did the desire to write first hit you? How long did it take to write the role?
The first draft took about 9 months to a year because I did a lot of, I'd write 10,000 words that didn't go anywhere and then I'd have to cut them and then I'd move back. And although I was an attorney, I was still job hunting. And so since this was like my like therapy for like, you send out 20 resumes a day and you don't hear back from 19. If you're lucky, you hear back from one. Kind of thing. So it was like my therapy. So like I would do all my resumes in the morning, and then my afternoons were for writing, and I'd write 1,500 words a day, and then I'd call it a day because I'd run out of steam or whatever. And so between all of that, it took about 9 months to a year to get the first draft really ready, and then after that. It took many more years of learning how to edit and the difference between editing and rewriting. And then I had an agent for a while, and then, we just couldn't sell it. And then finally I, had lunch with a good friend of mine, Steve Berman, who runs Lathe Press, and the rest of it was history. He was like, what are you doing with this novel? Like, it's good. Like, I don't understand why you're having difficulty. And I was like, I don't either. Please tell me. And he's like, well, if you are, interested, then like we would publish it and this is what it would be like. And I was like, yes, absolutely. Let's go. And then I got an editor through that. My editor, Nancy, is also a theater person. She was a professional prop mistress for many years. So she pointed out all of these things in my draft that like I was like, I'm so glad that you did this, because if I hadn't written this book and I was reading it and had bought it, these are the things that I would have pointed out, but like I was blind to it for some reason. And then we edited it, and so basically I finished my first draft in 2010, and it took until 2016 for it to come out, but there's like about 3 years of that where like I didn't really do a whole lot of work on it. So I would say it basically took 2 really solid years of writing, revising, and all that kind of stuff. And then the rest of it was kind of waiting on editors and sales and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you said for or at least part of that time you were looking for work as a lawyer, because I was kind of wondering, lawyers, at least the perception I think a lot of us have of lawyers is you just work, 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 and plus you're a husband and a father. Like, where do you find the time to write?
Well, that was the reason why writing the first draft was super easy because I was unemployed. When I got my job, it did become a lot harder because you work, 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 work. And when you're an attorney, the two things that you do all day are you read legal jargon and then you write a lot about it. And so it's very like I have like a certain amount of reading and writing stamina every day. And
Right.
so I would, like I need to find a way to make sure that like at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. or 9 p.m. or midnight or whenever I finally get done with all of my work, that I have the energy to like actually write. And so a lot of it was like, I was like, I'm just going to force myself to take a lunch break and write on that or that kind of a thing. And then on top of all of that, we had a daughter. And then I was basically forced to only write on the weekends, which was rough. Because even like when she was little and she sleeps all the time, you're so exhausted that it's just hard to do anything. Now she's 1 year old and like she's much easier and like I can get a couple of hours here and there. And so yeah, that's basically where I'm back now. I have like certain word goals. Like during the week, I want to write 1,500 words, which is hard for me since I used to do that in a day, and now I'm doing it over the course of 5 days. And I'm like, if I can write 500 words every 2 days, then like I'm good. So it's much slower going, which drives me crazy when I finally like find where I'm going, and then I'm like, oh, now I want to keep doing it, and then like someone at my job will be like, hey, are you off of lunch yet? And I'm like, yes, okay. But yeah, like it's definitely been a big adjustment, and I really like kick myself now all the time where I'm like, oh man, when I had the time, why did I sit there and play like Dragon Age for 3 hours instead of writing? I should have been doing that because I can play Dragon Age whenever, but like writing is something that like when you have the time to do it, you just have to really, really love it and make sure that you find it.
Right. So, got to get some theater questions in.
Of
So,
course.
what's the favorite show that you've appeared in?
That I have personally appeared in,
Yeah.
my favorite show was the Scarlet Pimpernel, a Frank Wildhorn musical, and I had this very like minor role. The basic plot of the Scarlet Pimpernel is that this very like macho guy has to pretend to be a very fancy, like flighty, gay acting femme man in order to convince the world that he is not this swashbuckling hero. So that's his like cover. And so he and his very macho, awesome friends all dress up in ridiculous costumes and like powdered wigs and are like, oh dear, kind of a thing. And one of his friends, Elton, is not macho. And so the joke is constantly that he's really, really good at pretending to be very fey. And that was the character that I got to play. And my favorite compliment anyone ever gave me about that performance was, by the end of the show, I laughed when you opened your mouth because I knew it was going to be funny. I was like, that's a good compliment. I like that. And then for non-musicals, I would say the best thing I ever did was I was in a production of Hamlet in college that rehearsed for months. It was like this very intensive thing. And even though I was like in the ensemble, I played one of the players that comes and like we played like messengers and that kind of thing. That particular production was so meaningful and so interesting and taught me so much about how to perform Shakespeare and why Hamlet is regarded as being such an impressive text as it is. And, when we closed on that final performance, the audience went nuts and like they gave us many extra curtain calls and like stamped to their feet and like we were like backstage getting dressed because we'd done more curtain calls than we'd ever done in our life, and we were finally just backstage changing out of our costumes, and our director burst through the doors and was like, they want you to come back. And so we all like came out, like I was half dressed, I had no idea what I was doing, and like we just gave another bow, and like it was this very like wonderful moment to have such a performance that we all loved, so celebrated, and that was such a really big, meaningful moment for me.
Are you appearing in anything these days?
No, I haven't lately. I do a lot of like stage readings for various shows, but I haven't done like a proper performance probably in about a year. My nights and evenings are now much more harder to deal with now that I don't want to make my husband have to care for our daughter solo for 3 months at a time or anything like that. But now that she's older, like I'm definitely like looking back to get back into it, and I'm very excited. But I do like, kind of like one man, like one night kind of things here and there. But I haven't done like a role probably in about a year and a half.
Okay. So the Tony Awards are right around the corner.
Yeah.
What do you like this season for musicals and plays?
Well, last night I went and saw Long Day's Journey into Night with Jessica Lange. If she was nominated and she deserves it. I've never seen Jessica Lange on stage before, and now I really understand why everyone recommends that you do that at least once in your life. She just gives a total masterclass in acting, and she expresses so many things using so many variances of the human voice, and I really loved seeing that craft at work. The whole production was lovely and absolutely amazing. Jessica Lange really shone. Of course, Hamilton is amazing and wonderful, and I consider myself exceptionally blessed that I did get to see a performance of it recently, and it definitely lives up to that kind of reputation. It is an amazing production. However, my favorite production of the season was Def West's production of Spring Awakening.
Yep.
I think that production, was so absolutely moving. I cannot explain, and I'm so excited that it's going on tour because I think that it is so important for everyone to go. And while Hamilton is this juggernaut and this, truly incredible, amazing thing, I hope that Michael Arden actually beats it for Best Musical Direction because I think his vision for that show was inspired. It made one of my all-time favorite shows even more enjoyable in a way that I don't think anyone other than him could have done.
Yeah, we've talked about on the show since the awards came out about Spring Awakening, and like the big miss in that for me in the nominations was that Spencer Liff wasn't nominated for choreography for the amazing work that he did to make all that work.
Right. I mean, that was because like the original production of Spring Awakening I saw many times. The choreography for that was absolutely incredible. And to find a way to kind of capture the spirit of that very syncopated type of movement, but also deal with the fact that you're also needing to use sign language and do all of these additional things, and to find a way to kind of meld those two, I agree. It was a very big, strange oversight in my mind. I was like, I don't know. I was worried that was like an indication that I was like, did people not get it? Like, what happened there? Because it was just that show just like me in such a weird way. Because I was both I was crying out of happiness seeing these amazing actors, many of whom were deaf, many of whom probably never thought they would ever be on a Broadway stage. Absolutely loving every second of being on that stage, even though they're telling a very tragic kind of story. And then on top of it, just like the layer of ready all about miscommunication, and so adding the fact that deaf actors are doing it was so powerful. It was so good.